mean, something that I thought about just in my driving. I famously do not prepare for these because I don't want to seem scripted or beholden to any sort of idea. But
I don't either.
yeah, and but I'll tell you, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, this is something I've always wanted to do, right? And I admire you for a lot of different stuff, but one of the things that I do quite a bit is for you to not only write a book, right, but to write a book about something so deeply personal, about Christina and about your faith. I mean, I don't know what else you have that dialed up that could be more vulnerable than this. But I mean, I've just, like, what was your journey in deciding to do that? Obviously the inspiration was there, but to finally arrive at actually doing it, like, what was that like?
It was hard. I started writing that book 4 other times, and I couldn't do it. Emotionally, I just couldn't do it. And I knew that for me, writing was putting thoughts down into words and aligning my thoughts but for some reason, at some point, God just worked it out where it was the right time to start writing it. I have a mentor, a friend of mine named Dan, who's in fact I'll see him next weekend in Albuquerque. And hi Dan. And he's an author, published author, very successful at it, written some great books. And he just helped me. So you just need to write small pieces at a time.
Yeah.
So I just started writing just a little bit, and I just had to stop, and a little bit, and had to stop, and eventually those little bits started increasing, and then it just flowed.
Yeah.
And when it flowed, it really flowed. It was so therapeutic.
How long did it take you?
Probably a month.
That's it.
Yeah, maybe less.
But like you said, when it flows, right?
And it
so
really, yeah, because it was, I mean, a lot of that were things that I had already been thinking about for a long time. Some of those things for years I've been thinking about.
Yeah.
And I'm a storyteller. I love telling stories. My wife has a thing she likes to do. If I want to come home from work and I want to tell her, hey, I got to tell you something. This is really cool. But I can't just tell her. I have to give the background, and I have to paint a picture.
Yeah.
And I have
It's a sunny day.
And then my wife is like, she's just staring at me like, and she does this thing. She goes, get to the point, you know.
Yeah.
And she's not cruel about it. We have a big laugh about it. But
yeah.
I'm a storyteller. I like telling stories, and so when it just flowed into that storyline.
Yeah.
And it was very healing. It's very, very healing.
I imagine, and obviously this is as a consumer of the book, and I really enjoyed it. I'll kind of get into that here in a little bit.
You have to say that because.
Well, yeah. Go now to this. But I have to imagine that when you started, you were telling Christina's story, and your story as a dad, right?
Right.
If I were to just tell James what this is about, it's a spiritual man navigating the passing of his daughter.
Okay.
Right. I mean, I'm just trying to condense it super short because I can get up there and, fail to get to the point too as well. But I don't know if you really set out to write the book where it's taking these negative thoughts, right? I mean, because your thoughts are your enemies sometimes, and those are your anchors, and those are the things that hold you back. I see it's multifaceted from that perspective, right? And I don't know if that was something you wanted to make sure was ingrained into the book, if that was really part of your experience, or again, if you just put pen to paper, so to say, and the pen took you there. Does that make sense?
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, I'm the kind of writer, storyteller that once I get going, it just happens. Just the creative mind God gave me, the creative process I have. But yeah, the book is. Here's how I describe it. I tell people, well, the book is about my daughter Christina, who got childhood cancer and died from it. But it's not really about Christina.
Mm-hmm.
And the book is about me as her dad, who battled anxiety and depression, and no one likes to talk about it, so I wanted to expose it,
Mm-hmm.
break that ice, and then my story through all of that. But the book's not really about me.
Yeah.
The book is really about the Son of God who came to this earth and died for our sins and rose from the dead. And when we believe in him, he gives us his life, which is everlasting. It is an incredible life. And he says in John 10:10 that the thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy. But I have come, he says, that they may have life. And he doesn't stop there. Life more abundant.
Mm-hmm.
Life lived above the common. An incredible life.
Yeah.
And, being a Christian doesn't always make us happy. I mean, I'm not happy that my daughter died, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the parent's worst nightmare. But there is a joy and a peace and a strength and then a courage that is not me, because I am prone to anxiety and depression. I've had multiple bouts with panic attacks before we even knew what panic attacks were.
Mm-hmm.
Remember my worst one, I was in our walk-in closet, and I remember being on the floor and every muscle in my body just tensed, and I'm breathing back and forth just like I have no idea what's happening. I'm scared to death, and I would scare my wife many times. She would have friends kind of come in and check on me, say, "Hey, how you doing?" It's like, "My wife sent you, didn't she?" Goes, "Yeah." But now here I am, 10 years later, and then I have no anxiety and depression. They're just every now and then I'll see anxiety raise its ugly head, but I know how to battle it. So, but the story's really not about it. It's about, and Jesus is the center of the whole thing.
Yeah. Hey, how did that? I mean, you mentioned earlier, your son. It something like this challenges everybody, right? And did it obviously shook your faith?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where did it take you from there? Stronger, more enlightened? Kind of where did it take you? I think that's probably a really big question, but...
Yeah, it's a big question. It's a good question. Being a Jesus follower, I trusted Christ when I was real little. And growing in Christ isn't like this.
Not a linear path.
No, it's like this.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And so going through this situation, Christina gets cancer. It just, bam, the worst words the parent can hear is, "I'm sorry, your daughter has cancer."
Yeah.
And then it gets worse. We don't know what kind it is yet. Then it gets worse. This is the bad kind. And then it gets worse. The prognosis is bad.
Yeah.
Then 4 years, it's like, oh, wow, what's going on? She's doing fine, and then just like that. It did shake my faith. Well, two things, Terry. One, it shook my faith where I had to go back and go, okay, why do I believe God is real? And I was a pastor for 20-something years. I have a theology degree. I've been a Christian for 40-something years. Grew up in a Christian home. But we were talking earlier that a person has to own his faith, not somebody else's faith. Mm-hmm. And that there's been moments in my life where Jesus became more real and more real and more real. So that was one thing where, I had to deal with, okay, why do I know you're real? And just go back to the very simple foundation and just start piecing things together. Mm-hmm. Just start piecing things back together. And I didn't do this alone. Worst thing to do is do something like this alone. Surrounded by strong, godly, people, my wife, my parents, some friends.
Yeah.
And obviously my wife going through the same thing. And then you start asking the questions, okay, God, I'm as always, I've been totally convinced that you're real. So now the question is why? Mm-hmm. So the big question that man has entertained for hundreds, if not thousands of years. How can a God who says he's good and he's all powerful, how can evil happen? That just doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah.
So just start wrestling through that. And I can come up with theological answers, and there's some solid theological reasons to answer that question. Logical reasons, there's some logical reasons that can answer that question. But the second thing, and it was almost like a switch that was flipped for me. I really started healing, and life really began to change for me when I came to the point of, okay, I don't know why, but I don't have to know why anymore.
Right.
I just trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what God wants from us more than anything. I just want to know that you trust me. Because you don't know what's going to happen in the future, and it's amazing. It's more than you can ever imagine. The Scripture tells us that.
Right.
Today you hurt, and I hurt with you. Just trust me. And so when I told God that, I said, I don't know why, but I trust you.
So, I mean, obviously, like you said, that's kind of one of the $1 million questions that people have, wherever they've been, I feel like, in their faith journey. It's the why, right? And there's big theological questions and answers and explanations and things like that. But at the end of the day, you had to find, surely, you've kind of let go and let God, so to say, at one point. But you really did kick around some potential answers somewhere along the way, right? And surely you justified that or attempted to answer that somewhere along this way, right? Like, why? This is why it's happening.
Like coming up.
Yeah, why would you let this happen to me? We're good people.
I've thought about this for a while because I have had friends who were more angry at God than I was.
Right. For what, right?
Really. And I'm not putting myself on a pedestal that I don't belong. I'm just saying, because she was going through this probably umpteenth clinical trial, and I get a call. I'm speaking at a conference in Indiana, and I'm in my hotel room, and my cell phone rings, and it says unknown. And I know that anytime it says unknown, it's a doctor. Mm. And it was the only time that I wasn't there when she's having her scans, CT scans. And anybody who has, scans and you're waiting for results, we call that scanxiety. So I'm waiting in the hotel room, and I know she had those scans. And phone rings, and the doctor says, "Are you sitting down?" I was like, "No, and I'm not going to. Whatever it is you tell me right now." He goes, "The cancer's gone. The tumors are gone. We can't find them in her lungs." Mm-hmm. It started in her arm. It traveled to her lungs. Mm-hmm. That before we knew what was going on. Well, and 3 months later, she died. It came back with a vengeance, and it just took her fast, And I remember sitting down with a friend of mine who was a pastor, and he goes, "Chad, to be honest with you, I'm struggling." So, well, what's wrong, man? He goes, "I'm angry at God because how can he do that to you guys? Her cancer was gone, and it came back, and it just, And so I had friends that were more angry,
right?
And I get it. I guess for me, by that time, I was sick and tired of walking, or as I put it in the book, sick and tired of swimming around in the dark, stormy ocean of anger. Because that's what anger leads to. Anger, unchecked, deep-seated anger that you don't process, produces anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. And I was so sick of being in that, and I have never felt the intensity of the presence of Jesus than that last day. Just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. It was, and it's funny because I want that. I want that intense feeling of the presence of Jesus again.
Right.
But not the crisis that tends to produce it. But I did. It did shake my faith. I did have the questions, but I could not deny the presence of God so intense.
Yeah.
During those last days, and especially that last day.
Why is that? What about the last day was so impactful or made it so real for you? so assuring?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that question. I just, you know, here's how I can answer that. 2 Corinthians 12, the Apostle Paul is writing, and he tells this amazing story of how, and scholars think that this was the time whenever he was almost killed. Mm-hmm. Well, he probably was killed. Mm-hmm. That's what scholars think. He had died. He had gone to the third heaven, and he had seen things that humans hadn't seen, and he had heard things that humans hadn't heard in the whatever that third heaven is. That and you know, whether he wasn't dead and he saw things, or he was dead and God resurrected him. Point is, he realized that I have seen the most incredible things in my life that could really make me so arrogant and so prideful. And he writes to the Corinthians, and in chapter 12 he says, so to keep me humble, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, there was a thorn in my side, a messenger of Satan sent to buffet me, to beat me, and to keep me humble. And he says, and I prayed 3 times for Jesus to take this, whatever it is, away.
Right.
And we don't know what it was. Whatever it is, away. It's prayed 3 times. I take that as Paul prayed over and over and over again. And I know what that's like. You know, God, just over and over, would you heal her?
Yeah.
And so Paul's just praying over and over again, would you take this from me? And Jesus says no. He says no. He says no. And so here I am, I'm praying over and over, would you heal her? And Jesus says no. Now what kind of a God would say no? I mean, I'll tell you, it's only a God could take something so evil as a childhood cancer and bring about some of the most amazing miracles to come out of that, and change the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of people.
Yeah.
Because of that girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that earlier. I mean, obviously, I enjoy the times that I get to visit with you and just sit back and listen. I don't pretend. Yeah, and I know things. Likewise. And you know things, right? Yeah. And I really enjoy hearing you talk about the things that you know, because you never once put on your pastor voice with me, which I really appreciate. You're not going to scare me if you do, but
I lost that voice a long time ago.
It makes me feel like we're having a conversation, but a conversation about something that is very meaningful and intimate and things like that. I forgot where I was going. That'll be edited out. It'll be good. It'll come back to me. Like I said, seizure stuff. Oh, I was going to say. We'll figure it out.
There you go.
It's, I don't think this can be a secular belief too. You know, whatever the case may be, but things definitely have a butterfly effect. That's not a spiritual belief. That's nothing at all, right? But Christina's life and your response to your struggle with that, your response to Christina as your daughter, period. That's given you a voice. That's given you a book. Like I said, that's given you the ability to tell her story and your story, and it's affected me. Her life. Unfortunately, I never met her, but her life has affected me. And that's in ways that I can tell you, but there's going to be other people out there who can unfortunately relate to your story far more than I can. But they don't have the ability to understand their feelings. They may have been just mired in those dark seas in anger, right? And so her life, I never got the feeling from you ever that this was just entirely negative and terrible and all those awful things. Yeah. Right? I've always felt like this is God's will, and her life was still used.
Well, it was. And here's the second part of that 2 Corinthians 12 passage when Paul prays over, please take the thorn out of my side. And Jesus says, my grace is sufficient for you, for when in your weakness, there I am strong. And what he means is, if I take the thorn If I take the problem out of your life, then you're going to feel comfort. And that's what you want, is comfort. That's what we all want. We don't want absence of pain. We want nothing but comfort, which I'm totally convinced now that the grace of Jesus is far superior than any kind of comfort that we could ever experience on this earth. So in Paul's weakness, he was able to experience the powerful grace of Jesus in his life that he would not have experienced were it not for that painful situation.
Right.
I heard somebody say, I think I read this somewhere. He says, nobody has ever said the last 3 years have been the easiest, most comfortable years of my life. And I've learned so much. I mean, no one's ever said that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Because you don't learn really, you don't grow in the comfort and in the ease.
Yeah.
You grow in the struggle and in the pain and in the heartache. And so go back to your question, why did I feel or why do I think I felt so much of God's presence? Is because his grace truly is sufficient.
Yeah.
It's just it just is.
Yeah. And I mean, no longer was that just a belief that you had, but it was a reality that you felt at that point. I mean, it was really putting it to the test. Like, all right, well, it better be sufficient. I'm going to find out one way or the other.
I'm living proof that his grace is sufficient.
Yeah.
And there are many, many others who are living proofs that Jesus means what he says.
Yeah.
His grace is sufficient.
Obviously, you were fighting it's something unrelatable to so many people, that your relationship as a father with your dying child, right? I mean, that right there is enough. But you still also had to be a husband, and a husband to a mom who is navigating that as well, and to siblings also having their own relationship. But as a dad, you probably have to kind of maintain this cornerstone. How do you even begin to navigate that?
A lot of crying in the bathroom by yourself.
Yeah.
Especially those last few days. Even the last day, the last morning, she died at 8:37. And we got up early that morning, and Melissa and I would take turns being with Christina and with the kids, and then go to the bathroom and cry. Then she would come out, being with Christina. You know, you want to, I don't know. I don't know if I have this figured out, Terry, but you want to be strong for your family, but at the same time, you want them to understand it's okay to be broken.
Yeah.
Because I heard somebody else say one time that it's the broken vessels. It's when the vessel is broken, that's when the light shines through the best. And going back to that passage that Paul wrote, in Paul's brokenness, Jesus' power was just incredible in his life. And it was after that event that Paul wrote from prison a letter to Christians, the church in Philippi, of how they can have joy.
Right.
How can someone write? Hey, I want to tell you how you can have
Things
joy.
Things are going good for me.
Really?
Right
well,
now.
where are you? I'm in prison for telling people about Jesus. But I want to tell you how to. He wouldn't be able to do that if Jesus would have taken that thorn out of his side. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You talk about something. I feel like this is a whole nother part of the book that resonated with me as well, and I touched on it earlier. But you talk about, for you, it's fear and anxiety. Mm-hmm. And for so many others, myself, it's guilt and shame. Mm-hmm. And, you just told me about, it's dads suffering in silence so often. Yeah. I mean, with you, you had come to cope and you were still in the process with Christina and the kids and Melissa and things like that. So they knew where you were. But there's so many dads out there who truly, they suffer in silence.
Yeah. And,
your fear and anxiety is certainly, one of those things where it's just like, you're scared, get over it. You got mouths to feed. You got people who look up to you. The anxiety, you don't have time to be anxious. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Go to work. Mm-hmm. Right. Make it happen. For so many others, it's the guilt and the shame. Mm-hmm. Right. The things that I've done will prevent me from ever being the type of person that I need to be. Or if all these people that I love knew everything about me, there's no way that they would respect me and still care about me the way that they do. But I've just been on such a kick and trying to talk about that as much as the opportunity presents itself, and just to present a very real, insight into the types of battles that dads are facing. Right. And I saw that come up several times in your book. And like you said, I mean, I thank you for talking about the guilt and the shame, and for getting that out there, because that addresses some of us. Yours was really fear and anxiety. Do you feel fear and anxiety, I guess, more than guilt and shame, or why your emphasis on the fear and the shame, or have you been able to navigate the guilt and the shame, or the fear and anxiety? And did you find out a way to navigate the guilt and the shame better than me?
I think everybody's different.
Yeah.
And I think it's all three: fear, shame, and guilt for everybody. Maybe people have had different experiences in life that would cause one to stand out more than the others.
Right.
One could lead to the other. Guilt can lead to shame. Fear could lead to all three. But I guess for me, it was just fear is telling yourself, it's believing that something bad is going to happen. The ice is going to break under my feet. This is off. Something's wrong. My future is unknown.
Right.
In other words, I might as well give up. I need to give up because I'm going to die if I try. I try this. And dads feel this. You will feel this when your kid turns 16 and dad can have the keys to the car. Oh, no. And then shame. I think every dad feels shame. I've had dads come and tell me, I feel like I'm a horrible dad. And I was like, well, welcome to the club. Right. We all feel like we're horrible because we all are horrible dads. We all mess up. Yeah. I have memories in my mind I wish I can just eliminate forever. Things that I've said and done to my kids that I've apologized many times, and they finally said, would you just stop apologizing? Right. We forgot about it. You keep bringing it up. You know. But shame says, really, it is me telling myself, or you telling yourself, that you are not valued. You are not good enough. You're not worthy. So you might as well give up, just quit. And then guilt says, I know what you did last night. I know what you did last summer. And I know your past. You're dirty. You're wicked, and you're not going to measure up. So just give up. Yeah. But to answer your question, for some reason or another, fear was in some ways in my life it was, and in others it wasn't. But the anxiety would pop up out of nowhere and just unannounced. Yeah. And I have my dad, I remember even as a kid having these conversations with my dad, and he's never battled this before. He couldn't understand. My wife has never battled this before. She couldn't understand. I remember my dad saying, well, son, everything's fine. Just quit feeling that way. It's like, well, how do I do that? Is there a switch I just flip and I'm just, everything's fine now, you know? And Dad tried, he's just trying his best, But it stems from several things, and I think one of the biggest things is that that anxiety, which my anxiety caused my depression, and it is pent-up anger. In fact, there are psychiatrists, Dr. Minirth and Dr. Meyer, who wrote an incredible book called Happiness is a Choice, which I used to hate the name of that book. It's not my fault. Yeah. It's life. Yeah. It's this, it's that, it's the other.
It's that easy to choose,
Yeah. But happiness is a choice, and and in that, and these are psychiatrists. These guys know what they're talking about. They don't just post stuff on Facebook and really believe it because
they're not influencers. Yeah.
And they say, and they have a paragraph. I remember the paragraph, and there's all this $1 million medical terms of different parts of the body that one causes this to happen, and one causes this to happen, and cortisol rises, and and all of that. And they conclude that the number one cause of death is pent up anger. Your body just can't handle it.
Yeah.
Your body physically cannot handle pent-up anger. And for me, mine turned into anxiety attacks. And I think that is probably, I would venture to say, 90% of people's anxiety stems from unprocessed anger. And anger comes from a blocker of my goal that I cannot control. Here's my goal. I want to reach this. There's something that's blocking, and I cannot control that.
Some externality.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I really can't control it.
Right.
So I get angry.
So how do you, I mean, so you said you used to, I mean, panic attacks are something you know well, right? The anxiety, overwhelming. Did you figure something out along the way to help you battle that better? To kind of minimize the externalities, or kind of where are you in that process?
So it starts with a belief process. It starts with your belief system determines your thinking. Your thinking causes your emotions. Your emotions causes your behaviors, produces your behaviors, and behaviors results in consequences. Okay. So when I understood that truth, I, with the help of a small number of people in my life, started identifying the lies that I was telling myself. So no one talks to you more than you talk to you. You talk to yourself more than anybody else does. The bad part of that is a lot of those things you tell yourself are lies.
You're mean. Yeah.
You're mean to yourself.
Yeah.
You're mean to yourself. A lot of those things you tell yourself are lies. And a lot of those lies come through fear, shame, and guilt. You know, Terry, you're going to die if you try. You might as well quit. Terry, you're unvalued. You're unworthy, so you might as well quit. Terry, you're guilty. You're dirty. You're rotten. You might as well quit.
Thank you so much.
You were very welcome. Have another drink.
And that's a wrap.
I started identifying what those lies were, and intentionally, and it was hard for a while, replacing those with truth. The question is, where do I get the truth from? Because a lot of people say they have truth. There's a lot of self-help books out there where you just need to believe in yourself. I can't believe in myself. I feel like I'm a failure.
Yeah.
That's how I'm believing in myself. So the truth came straight from Scripture. And another one of Paul's writings, and the one he wrote to the Philippians that I was talking about a while ago, how to have joy, he says, be anxious for nothing. In other words, he said, stop being anxious. And I'm glad he didn't stop there. Stop being anxious. You know, so how do I do that? Oh, okay, well, I'll tell you.
Good dad advice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's like a dad a husband telling his wife, well, stop feeling that way,
right.
honey.
Some biblical gaslighting, I think is what it is.
Be anxious for nothing, but in everything through prayer and supplication, and here's a big thing for me, with thanksgiving. I've developed a habit of being thankful. Every day, I develop a habit of being thankful. I get up in the morning, my feet hit the floor, and I say, God, I don't know what's going to happen today, but I thank you for it.
Yeah.
I'm just thankful. And it gets my eyes off of me and puts it on, God, I trust you, and I'm thankful for whatever's going to happen. And,
right.
And it changes an attitude. So with prayer and supplication, so there's prayer, there's thanksgiving, and then he gets into this thing of whatever is true, as opposed to lies, whatever is, I don't remember the order, trustworthy, praiseworthy, a good report, all of these positive things. He says, think on these things. And when you think on these things, then he says, the God of peace will surround your heart and your mind through Christ Jesus. And what the Greek word there for surround, literally, it's the word used often for like when the soldiers are guarding a precious treasure and keeping the enemy out.
Yeah.
So the peace of God will surround your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus, keeping the evil out, if you think on these things.
I'm arming you.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's what you need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not against antidepressants. There's a time and a place for them, but I think they're far, far more overprescribed.
Yeah.
I think
Band-Aids.
when
They're Band-Aids.
people get mad at me when they hear me say, all you need to do is start thinking on these things. Well, that doesn't work. I was like, yeah, it does.
Try it.
It does. It really does. So thinking on these things, so I was replacing the lies with truth, and eventually because I believe that to be true, and eventually my emotions followed my thoughts.
Yeah. There's a book, I feel like you were really just teeing this up. There's a book called The Miracle Morning. Have you read that before? It was written by a guy, and he literally died in an accident. So he's dead on the road. They brought him back to life. And, that, along with Tuesdays with Morrie, another really good book I'm not sure if you've ever read. When you're dying, you have the ability, if you are still able to communicate and exist in the world around you while you're actively dying or have died, right? There's no way you can't see the world through a different lens at that point, right? Because I'm never going to die, right? Because I got too much to do. I got bills to pay. I got too much to do. I can't afford to die right now.
Yeah.
Right? But then when it happens, or then when you get that diagnosis or whatever the case may be, you see things through less of a fleshly lens, so to say. But this Miracle Morning book, he was a young guy too. And he said, now I can see all of the things that I always said that I wanted to do, but I never did it because I didn't have enough time. And I was like, wow, this seems like it's going to be a really long, big book. Because I'm like, make time for yourself to read. Make time for yourself to be a better spouse. Make time to think more positively.
All that does is add guilt to me.
Right. Well, yes. Here was the trick, though. The trick was, and it speaks to the three of us. You want to you want to write. You want to change the way you think. You want to find silence, right? Wake up an hour earlier. Do each of these things for 10 minutes. And he says, I'm not going to prescribe to you what these things are because you have your own deficiencies or you have your own, concerns and your own wants. Wow. He said, come up with 4, 5, or 6 of them and give 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes. Because then at the end of the day, you will not have said, I didn't have time for that. Because you will have done it just for 10 minutes. And so for all these people that say, well, I'm not a morning person. When I do these things, my day changes. And so the things for me that I do, and this is really difficult, and I really challenge everybody to do this, sit in silence, right? I wake up, the house is dark. There's only really, like refrigerator noises. But the loudest thing is my head, right? And so I try to go out there and sit, and I just try to find silence is what I call it.
That's
and
awesome.
It takes me a really long time to achieve that. Which is crazy because, there's no children, there's no dogs, there's no anything else going on, but it takes me a while to find silence.
Yeah.
Another thing that I do is I try to do like the little box breathing or whatever the case is. But the two things that you mentioned that really make me think and that really resonated with me because I had read Miracle Morning and then I'd read your book, and just these parallels are right there. Both of you guys are telling me the exact same thing. But it's very easy, especially as dads, to just have this litany of lies that we tell ourselves. And as soon as you put it out there on paper, and then in the next column, why is this not true? Right? I am not a good enough dad. You're right. BS. You sat there and you had dinner with your kids last night, and do you remember how they laughed when you told them, about this joke or whatever the case may be? Scratch out that first part. I'm a bad dad. There's no way that I'm ever going to be as successful in my business as I want to be. That's BS because you just had 3 other people come up and give you a hug and said, thank you so much for helping me with this thing that we never thought anybody would be able to help us with. And so just almost categorically, you're able to write down the lie, come to truth with the terrible things that we're mean to ourselves about. And the truth will show us that that's a lie. Right. And then another part of my morning, when I'm good enough to do it or when I'm, convicted enough to do it, is just gratitudes. You know, and I mean, there are some times when I just read through a list of things that are already there. The word will come to me later, but gratitudes of just 3 things every day that I'm thankful for. And it's not big, large things. It's because if I do that, then I'm gonna plumb run out of things. But it's just like, thank you for finally being sunny yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, or thank you that thank you that Tate didn't cry when we played Foursquare last night for the first time ever. But it's just, there are just a world of things to be thankful and grateful for. We just have to think on them.
Well, the proverb says a merry heart does good like a medicine.
Yeah.
And when I think on negative things, I feel sick.
Mm-hmm.
When I think on things that I'm thankful for, it forces me to think on positive things. It's like medicine. I feel better.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But something you said, and you're exactly right. All of this is, think on the things that you have done well, and be thankful for those things that you've been able to do well. Tell yourself the truth on those.
Mm-hmm.
But what if it is true that I am a screw-up dad?
Mm-hmm.
What if that is the truth?
Right.
Because I have done things that were screwed up. I have to accept the truth even then, even when it's hard. Truth is not always positive,
Right.
but it's healing, because I will never be able to grow out of my mistakes, learn from my mistakes, if I don't take ownership of them first. And I think that's what Paul says, whatever is true, but whatever is true, trustworthy, praiseworthy. So what can Jesus do to a screw-up dad? When that screw-up dad says, okay, Jesus, I can't do this anymore. I need you to change my life. Jesus is not going to say, I don't want to change your life. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what, that's who Jesus is.
Yeah.
He's alive and he's well, and he's sitting on the throne, and he wants to rule your heart if you will just give it to him.
Yeah.
So I want you to run my life. I want to follow you. And he's changed me.
Yeah.
He has changed me. And I've made mistakes as a dad, and he's changed me. I'm different.
Yeah.
I'm a lot different. But if I don't take ownership of those mistakes, then I'll never change.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So sometimes telling myself the truth is hard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you can't lie to yourself, right? I mean, you can avoid yourself.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, yeah, maybe I am a terrible dad, maybe I'm not, but I don't know why.
Yeah.
Right? But coming to terms with these things and facing them head on, and then making a decision to change, asking for help, right? Praying, finding ways to help yourself. I mean, that's another battle in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I've got. I feel like we explored a lot of cool stuff, and
well, one more thing I'll add to the end of this. I am not to be put on any pedestal. I'm just an average guy that is following Jesus, and he's changed me. But I didn't grow out of my anxiety and depression alone. I didn't navigate through my daughter's death alone. I'll tell you a quick story, true story. A buddy of mine named Chris Strickland. You can go to YouTube and search Chris Strickland crash. Mm-hmm. He flew through the Thunderbirds. Mm-hmm. He wrote a book with another friend of mine named Joel Neeb. The book is called Survivor's Obligation. Great book. Get it and read it. Chris did all their calculations before their air show. He took off, and I'm not a pilot. I'm probably going to ruin these these words. I think it's called an S-split or split S. I don't know. Any pilots listening don't know what I'm talking about. He takes off, and he turns, and he starts to do this loop. When he's at the top, he realized he miscalculated. I'm fixing to go down with the plane. I'm going to die. And he says, I have to go down with the plane because there's hundreds of thousands of people over here, and I have to make sure the plane crashes away from them so it doesn't spill into the crowd. You can see in the YouTube video his training kicks in. He doesn't freak out.
Yeah.
He's just calm. And his training kicks in. He pulls a lever. the plane is 40 feet above the ground before it crashes when the ejection seat. The engineers with the ejection seat had him come and speak to him because we did not create that ejection seat to save a pilot's life that quickly.
Yeah.
Obviously he stayed alive, but it was extremely traumatic. He's now 2 inches shorter. It compressed his back. He's had several back surgeries, but he didn't talk about the incident for 13 years.
Yeah.
Not even to his wife. Didn't talk about it. And I was talking to him on the phone one time, and I asked him, and he didn't even let me finish the question he answered. But my question to him was, Chris, what was more dangerous to you, the crash or not talking about it for 13 years? And he goes, not talking about it. Wow. Keeping it to myself. And that's what guys do. That's what dads do. That's what husbands do. That's what men do. You know, all the best Hollywood blockbusters are the Rambos, the Arnold Schwarzeneggers. I can do this. I'm going to do this myself. You know, but that's not how life is. Yeah. You know, we were created by relationship for relationship. I don't battle anxiety and depression. In fact, I'm opposite of fear. Now I love jumping out of planes and climbing mountains.
Right.
And I didn't get here by my own.
Yeah.
I got here because I walked with other people in my life who spoke life into me, and it's changed me forever. And that's why I wrote the book, so I want other people to do the same.
Yeah. Well, me and James are looking forward to nude skydiving with you, so you can put that at the front of the
nude
podcast
skydiving.
Make sure that everybody tunes in.
I will not be filming that.
It's very freeing. Yeah.
How many skydive jumps have you been on?
Not a lot. I think it's 66, 67
Oh, that's a lot.
jumps. Well, it is relative because
It's R0, right?
guys and girls I jump with, it's up in the hundreds or the thousands. Mm-hmm. So, but I love it.
When did you start that? And why?
My first jump was probably 15 years ago, and then I went for a long time and didn't jump. Why? I'm fascinated with heights.
Yeah.
I've always loved heights. That's why I love the mountains. I love being high, being up high and seeing things forever.
Yeah.
I was born in the wrong state. Louisiana is flat and humid, and the mosquitoes will carry you away.
That's what I love about flying a drone, is I get to see.
Yeah.
Well,
it's one of my even as a kid. I always wanted to see what a bird's eye view is like.
Yeah. It's incredible. So when I was a kid, every night, almost every night of the week, I would dream that I could fly like Superman. I could dream I could fly. And I remember my first skydive was tandem. Got an instructor strapped to your back. They opened the door, 14,000 feet. They got these fun jumpers. And I remember this one girl, she just stood out the door and she opened her arms like that and just went like that. And I went, I want to do that. I am so going to do that. It's my dream. I've been dreaming about this since I was a kid. So I started skydiving and the dreams went away because they were fulfilled. So
how many jumps do you have to do before you can go by yourself?
So I jump at Skydive Spaceland, which is the #1 civilian skydive school in the country. People all over the world come here.
Is that the one in San Marcos?
One of them is in San Marcos. The owner's a friend of mine, Steve Boyd. He's got 5 drop zones. I learned at the one in Houston, the original one. The way they teach, 2 tandems, and you can go solo.
Oh. Wow.
So they start teaching you at the very first jump. So I'll throw something else in there. It's 2 tandems, and then you go through 4 hours of ground school, and they teach you a lot of stuff, like how to get out of malfunctions and all that. And then you start jumping with your own chute, but with a coach. So he or she will hold on to you your first, 5, 6, 7 jumps, and then let go a little bit until you can get the idea of. So, 2 tandems, and you can jump with your own chute.
Do you only go solo now? Or do you take other people? Can you? Or do you have to
I'm not an instructor. I'm just a fun jumper, but I invite a lot of people. I don't know, probably over the years I've introduced maybe 100 people.
My wife and I talked about it when we first got married, and we never did it.
Well, I'm bringing a group of people in about 3 weeks. to Spaceland in San Marcos.
I'm still gonna wait a little bit. George Bush was
out
doing
there
it.
now. So.
George Bush was doing it until he was 95.
Yeah. So what
got
excuse do you think?
Yeah, right. You got time.
What are you waiting on? Be president or something?
Nerves. No, I mean I don't have a fear of heights or anything. I think at one point because
Well, it's not natural.
I think
It's
because
definitely not natural.
I mean, at one point I was suicidal, so it was probably not going to be a good idea anyway, unless I was just seeking the thrill. And now that I'm not really, now that I'm not, like, why do I want to tempt fate?
Right.
Now that I don't really want to die.
Here's another. Here's another one.
Jumping out of a perfectly good plane.
It's better that jumping out of a good plane is a lot better than jumping out of a bad one.
True.
But here's another reason why. Talking about being intentional with your thoughts. I'm always nervous. People ask, "Are you still nervous jumping out?" I said, "Yeah, I'm nervous." If you ever jump out of a plane and you're not nervous, you need to take up fishing. But the plane is corkscrewing up to 2.5 miles, and in my mind, I'm making myself think this is going to be a great jump. Practice my emergency procedures. This is going to be a great jump. Make sure my 3 rings are in place. It's going to be a great jump. I got my helmet, got my goggles, got my altimeter. Focusing on the right thoughts, the positive thoughts.
Right.
And it was almost always a great jump.
Almost?
Yeah.
Almost always.
No, it was always a great jump.
Did you have any close calls?
No, not me.
You'd never had to pull a reserve chute?
Not yet.
Yeah. That's good.
Well,
that's how it should be.
I know people who have had to pull a reserve on their, I think it's probably the 8th or 9th jump of their life. And I know a girl named Christy who's jumped 5,000 and still haven't pulled.
Wow.
It's just, yeah.
Well, here's to not having to pull your reserve chute, Chad. Surely surely there's a book in that comment alone. So.
Oh, what a great title.
Yeah.
Maybe we could write it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your reserve chute is there.
Your reserve chute is always there.
Chad, thanks a lot. I appreciate the time you coming out and do this. This is a lot of fun. Like I said, I don't prepare for this typically, and I really like not preparing because it just
good strategy.
Like kind of the way
it's organic.
Right. Yeah. Jinx.
Yeah.
So
I like it. Well, thanks for inviting me, and I love talking about this topic. I love talking about Christina, and I love exposing what people don't like to talk about.
Yeah.
Because everybody battles it.
Yeah, and just giving dads the ability. Just you're not alone. Find a buddy. I mean, I just cannot stress enough the need for community and to find a friend, but be a friend.
Yeah,
be the guy, because I think a lot of times guys are just obsessed with fixing. You know, and let me do this for you. And I've run off a number of good, possible romantic relationships because, as guys, we want to fix. But sometimes women just want to talk.
I bet your wife appreciates that.
Yeah, I was going to say.
She talks. I want to fix by, all right, well, have a good night, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think I've run into that before. And I think having a good guy friend who will just sit there and listen to you, that's been such a huge fix in my life.
Listening is the trait of a true leader. You can actually influence through listening, because when you listen, you're giving the person an opportunity to process, to verbalize, and that's how you influence. That's a way of leading people through a journey.
Yeah. Well, awesome, Chad. Thank you so much.
Yeah, buddy.
Appreciate you being.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.